And I tell you, hair tonics, they're always a scam. Hey there, folks. Overdue Doctor Who review time, and we are now up to Planet of the Ood. Before we get into it, though, this is your little reminder that this particular episode of Council of Geeks is sponsored by Radio vs. the Martians. It's a podcast series that features Mike Gillis and Casey Dorn as they run down basically whatever geeky stuff they feel like talking about that given conversation. And they have all kinds of guests. They talk about Star Wars and Game of Thrones and comic books and Batman and wrestling and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Seriously, they're watching every Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. It's kind of amazing. So that's Radio vs. the Martians, radioversusthemartians.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, guys. So, Planet of the Ood. Donna Noble's first off-world experience. And this was one that I wondered if I was going to find more enjoyment out of it than my memory of it was. Kind of a bit like what happened to me with Fires of Pompeii, which I never disliked, but I think I got a lot more out of it on this rewatch than I did originally. Whereas with this, not quite. I came away about as I remembered, which was, yeah, that basically works. But there's a lot of nitpicky things about this one for me for various reasons. And they're things that I don't always know if I should be calling the show out for, but sometimes that's the nature of a nitpick. Like, I don't know why this is bugging me, but it's bugging me. And there's a fair number of them here. But before I get into that, I mean, what's good? Donna. I mean, like, Catherine Tate's so good in this part, and her and Tennant, they crackle on screen. Phenomenal. And I love the PR woman, saying, Dr. Noble, Mrs. Noble, and like, no, we're not together. And Donna's like, no, never ever. It's like just the emphasis on that I really, really do enjoy. It is nice that the Ood sort of get picked up on, given that the fact that the second great and bountiful human empire has a slave class, got established a couple seasons ago and never really picked up on. Yeah, this was a thread worth tugging on and getting some more stuff out of. Plus, I like the design of the Ood. I've always liked the design of the Ood. It was one of the first things that really grabbed my attention about Doctor Who as a show. So, I'm happy to see them back. The performances, for the most part, actually work pretty well. A fair number of there's like one really iffy performance, but I'll mention that at when I start getting into my nitpicks and my complaints. But for the most part, the performances are from the guest cast are solid. The Ood are very stoic, but I feel like one of the more convincing alien races. They exude a surprising amount of personality, especially given that they're really kind of not meant to have any. But they don't feel robotic. They feel like there's something going on there. And especially here where you get to contrast the wild Ood with the rabid Ood with someone like Ood Sigma, there's a surprising amount of variety in something that has very little movement in its face. So that works really well. You've got the guy who heads the whole company. That was a surprisingly detailed performance. And there was a little tiny detail that I think I caught it before, but I'd forgotten. Which is when, like, he's made the decision to just wipe this stock and start over. And he turns to Ood Sigma, who's his personal Ood, and he says, you're loyal to the end. Go, join your people. And it's that illusion and that projection that a slave owner has on, like, all these savages who I think nothing of, and I think so little of them that I treat them as property instead of sentient human beings. But that one there, I kind of like them. I still treat them as property, but I kind of like them. And like the episode doesn't get into this, but that's how people like that sleep at night. I don't treat all of them like that. What about Ood Sigma? I like him. Yeah, but you're still terrible. The PR woman was quite good. I like that she has a moment where the doctor, basically has his moment to talk her into getting on the right side of things, and she doesn't. Because the doctor can't convince everybody. And usually when the doctor's not going to talk somebody into doing something, it's clear right off the bat. There isn't that moment of, oh, maybe they will. Oh, no, wait, they didn't. That hadn't really happened too much up to this point. So that was a good moment. I like that too. Okay. So, as I said, most of what I'm about to complain about here are nitpicks. They're not massive structural problems, which are the sort of things that will totally sink an episode for me. The kind of nitpicks that I'm about to go into are more the things that will take a decent episode and just make it middling, which is pretty much what this becomes. It's not a bad episode. I don't dislike it, but here's some of the stuff that bugs me. First of all, I mentioned there's one performance that I don't think is very good, and that's the head of security. What is it with security heads in these things always being just psychotic people? And like he's controlling that claw trying to grab the doctor, and he's like, ah! What are you doing? Oh, God, it was so hammy. And like Doctor Who can have hammy acting, and sometimes it can even work. I honestly think that's a minority. But sometimes it can actually work. But not when you're also doing an episode trying to make a point about, slavery, basically. And like even going so far as to make parallels to exploited workers on Earth. Having the doctor explicitly draw that parallel. And you've got this goofy, hammy security head. No, doesn't clash of tones. Doesn't mix right there. In addition to that, okay. I generally tend to give a pretty decent amount of leeway for alien races that don't seem to make sense. Basically, largely because I'm willing to accept that whatever it is that doesn't make sense to me initially probably does if I knew more about them. But for the purpose of the story, we only learn so much. But there's something about the Ood here that really bothers me, and it's because of something that the doctor points out in the first place, but then what happens later really seems to contradict that. So, part of why the doctor starts sniffing around is he says a slave race could have never evolved on its own. So that's how he comes to the conclusion that they've been subjugated, because no race would just be sitting around needing orders. Which, fair. Except what we then later learn about the Ood, I have a hard time believing that evolved naturally either. So, the idea of a forebrain and a hindbrain, I get that. I can roll with that. I remember, learning about dinosaurs with hindbrains when I was in grade school. Like, cool. But it's external. They have to carry it. They have to occupy their appendages, at least one of which now has no other use. And it's like a brain. It's squishy. It's vulnerable. So your logic for why they must be subjugated is because a slave race would never evolve. But this thing with this external brain evolved naturally, and the way even Donna puts it, they're born with their brain in their hands. They're going to trust anyone who lands. Like, how is that any different from having been like an evolved slave race? There's a disconnect here for me between what is pinging the doctor's radar as being wrong and what I then get presented as, well, this is what it really is. And I'm like, what? And I honestly, this might only bother me because I've never seen anybody ever complain about this. But, okay, a couple more nitpicks to register. One very minor, and one honestly bothers me and has bothered me since I first saw this episode. So, the Ood singing, this is the minor one. I wish it had been more alien, because it just kind of sounds like opera, which opera's fine, but I wish it could have sounded more unique, more like something otherworldly. And because it sounds like something so identifiable, it unfortunately takes Catherine Tate's wonderful performance of the impact of hearing that song and dampens it slightly, because I'm like, it's just opera. Why is she crying? So, that kind of throws me off a little bit. Now, the thing that really bothers me, and again, I give this show a pretty decent leeway. I really try to avoid pedantic, technical and biological nitpicks. But Ood and humans are not... We don't even share a common ancestor. How do you transform a human being into an Ood? That's not science fiction, that's magic. And just, no. I don't buy it. I just don't. That entire ending segment, thematically I get it, but logistically it's a step too far. He completely changed species, down to the DNA level, no. So little nitpicks like that hold this episode back for me, which again is a bit of a shame, because there is good stuff here, and the performances, aside from the head of security, are all solid. So I get annoyed with myself when smaller things like this pile up and dampen my entertainment on something, because I don't like to be that person who just doesn't really have substantive complaints, but just a list of nitpicks. I don't like being that way, but sometimes that's just what I come away feeling. And that's kind of where this one leaves me. Planet of the Ood. You've seen it? What do you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Subscribe, like. I guess that's driving the algorithm right now, is the likes, so please. In addition to that, links for stuff like the Patreon. The support really helps keep things going, and my social medias, there's merch, there's all sorts of stuff, ton of links down there. Go ahead and click on them. You also don't have to, because at the end of the day, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings. Looking pretty good doing it too. And until next time, this council is adjourned. What was that moment, you narcissistic jackass?